Welcome to this Visualisations DAX for Power BI tutorial. In this part of the series, we'll take a look at how to use the switch function. So we'll start, as you might expect, by looking at some basic switch expressions which allow you to compare the values of a column against a list of constants. We'll then explain how you can modify your switch functions so that you can write proper logical tests, and explain the importance of the order in which you write those logical tests to get the correct results. In the final part of the video, we'll take a quick look at how to use a switch function to create a sort by column. So let's get started. To get started, I've created a new blank report, and as usual, the first thing I'll do in here is import some data from an Excel workbook. Just for a change, I'll click on the Import Data from Excel button on the canvas, and once the dialog box launches and I've navigated to the folder containing the file I want to import, I can double click on that to launch the import wizard. Again, I'll drop a link in the video description so you can download this file yourself. Once the dialog box is opened, I can check the box next to the Movies worksheet, then click the Load button to import all the data from that sheet into the report's data model. Once that has loaded, so that we can see the results of any expressions we create, let's head into the data view, and then we're ready to start writing our first switch expression. For the first example, I'd like to create a label for each film based on the value of the Oscar wins column. So I'd like to say things like if the Oscar wins equals 0, the film is a loser. If the Oscar wins is 1, it's a one-hit wonder. If it's 2, it's a double winner, and so on. So I basically want to test the individual specific values in the Oscar wins column and produce a unique result for each one. Now, if you watched the previous video in the series, you may be thinking we could do that using a sequence of nested if functions. And yes, we could. But hopefully you're also thinking, if you watched the previous video in the series, that that would be a terrible idea. The expression we'd have to write would be really awkward to create and maintain and make changes to later. For this sort of situation, a switch function is a much better choice. So let's create our new column to start with. If I click the New Column button on the Table Tools tab in the ribbon, and then I can zoom in on the formula bar either by holding the Control key and rolling my mouse wheel forwards, or Control and the plus key or the equals key to zoom in. Let's create a more sensible column name. I'm going to call this one Win Label. And then after the equals operator, type in SW to highlight the switch function, hit the tab key to enter the rest of the function name and open the round brackets, and then press Shift and Enter to head down to the next line, where we need to start by specifying an expression containing the values we're going to test for. So the expression in this case is going to be a reference to the Oscar wins column. So let's start typing in Oscar wins, and then hit Tab to get the rest of that typed in. Then we can type in a comma, Shift and Enter to create a new line, and then we specify the first value we want to test for in that column. So I'm simply going to write the value 0, and then follow that with a comma, and on the same line I'm going to write the result I want to return if the value of the Oscar wins column is 0. So in some double quotes, I'm going to call that film a loser. So at this point, it's a lot like a very basic if function. We've effectively written if the Oscar wins column equals 0, then provide the answer loser. So you can see we've specified the first 3 parameters of the switch function. Everything past that is optional. Just to demonstrate that, I'm going to press Shift and Enter, and then close the round brackets, and then press Enter to create my formula. And you'll see that any film which has 0 for the Oscar wins is indeed described as a loser, but the further down we scroll, when we get to the films which have won Oscars, they're provided with a blank. So far we haven't really done anything we couldn't have achieved with a basic if function, but the beauty of a switch function is how easy it is to add multiple possible conditions and answers. If we click back inside the expression, and then at the end of the word loser type in another comma, you'll see that when the tooltip returns, it's gained some extra parameters, value 2 and result 2. If I hit Shift and Enter to go down to the next line, type in the next value I want to test for, the number 1, followed by a comma, and then in some more double quotes, I can type in a description for films whose Oscar wins value equals 1. So I'll go for one hit wonder. If I type in a further comma, you'll see that I've expanded the tooltip again to have value 3 and result 3. If I hit Shift and Enter, I can enter the number 2, followed by another comma, and then I can, in some double quotes, let's call these double winners. And again, at this point, or double winner I should say, so at this point if I press Enter to update my expression, we'll see that all the 0 Oscar winners are still described as losers, but when I get down far enough, we ought to encounter some one-hit wonders and some double winners down there as well. Now at some point, possibly already in fact, you're going to get bored of testing for specific values and you'll just want to group everything else together in one final category. So at the moment, anything which hasn't been explicitly tested for 0, 1 or 2 currently has a blank. I'd like any of those films to be described as a multi-winner. So to do that we can make use of the else parameter of the switch function. If I type in a comma at the end of the final result I've created, press Shift and Enter, and then just enter the value I want to return. So I'm going to enter multi-winner, close the double quotes, and then press Enter. If I now scroll down again, anything which hasn't been captured by one of those 3 explicit values is now described as a multi-winner. So that was a fairly simple example where we're comparing the value of a column against a list of specific constants. For the next example, let's try something a little more complicated. I want to group my films based on their runtime into groups called short, medium, long and epic. And in order to do that, I don't want to have to write out every single possible runtime value I might encounter in that column. As the saying goes, ain't nobody got time for that. So instead what we're going to do is write a sensible logical test. We'll begin by checking if the runtime is less than 100, and if so, we'll describe the film as short. So let's create a new column, and I'm going to call this one length, and then say equals, switch, open the round brackets, and then Shift and Enter. Then we're a little bit stuck about what to write here. If we just start doing this by following the example we created earlier, if I refer to my movie's runtime column first of all, and then type in a comma, and then on the next line I try to say, is that less than 100? We'll find that we run into a syntax problem here. You'll see the red squiggly underneath the less than symbol. Whenever you're using comparison operators like a less than, greater than, etc., you must have a value on either side of the comparison operator to be compared. So this syntax is not correct. To make the syntax correct, I guess what I could do is say movies runtime, or in fact, I'll just say runtime and then get the movies keyword filled in for me. So now this is a valid logical test. Is the movie's runtime less than 100? I could then type in a comma, and then in some double quotes, write the word short, and then I could close the round brackets and press Enter, but then I'll be a little bit upset to find that that returns an error. Now the reason this returns an error is because of what this expression returns. When you're writing logical tests, the only 2 possible results are true or false, as this little error message here describes. The expression you write here for the values in a switch function are compared with the initial expression you write. So I'm trying to compare true or false with a number. So this isn't going to work. What I need to do is change the initial expression to match the possible return values of our logical tests. So I want to check the expression true. So I'll type in the word true, hit the tab key to type in the rest of that and get the open and closed round brackets. So if the result of this expression matches this expression, then I'm going to get the word short. So if I update my expression now by pressing Enter, I'll find that any film whose runtime is less than 100 now returns the word short. So now that we have our first logical test working, we can simply start adding more. And rather than writing all these out from scratch, let's make use of a nice keyboard shortcut. I'm going to click at the end of the existing expression and answer, line number 3, and I'm going to type in a comma to move on to the next parameter. Then I'm going to hold down the Shift and Alt keys and tap the down arrow key. So that will duplicate that line, and I'll press Shift and Alt and do the same thing one more time. So I've got 3 separate logical tests. What I can now do very easily is just update my conditions. So let's change the second condition to check whether the value of runtime is less than 150. And then the third one can check if it's less than 200. And then we can update our descriptions. So I can say medium and then long. And then for everything else, we can head to the end of that last line, press Shift and Enter, and then in some double quotes, we can write the word epic. If we hit Enter now, we'll update the expression, and now every film will receive a description according to where it falls in these different categories. Now it's worthwhile just taking a moment to think about how the switch function decides on which value to return. If we take our first film in the list, Evan Almighty, with its runtime of 96 minutes, which was more than long enough if you ask me, if we compare the value 96 with these conditions, 96 is less than 100, but it's also less than 150, and it's also less than 200. So why do we get short and not medium or long? The reason is quite simple. The switch function evaluates the conditions in the order we write them. So the first condition it encounters is 96 minutes less than 100? Yes, it is, so I'll return short, and that's it. It doesn't get evaluated for the remaining conditions. I've already got my answer. So that does mean it's quite important when you construct switch functions like this that you write your conditions in an appropriate order. If we had decided to do things the opposite way around, let's just quickly demonstrate that. If I put 200 first and 100 last, and then just switch around our conditions so we get long and short, then this means that the vast majority of our films will be described as long. Let's just update our expression to do that. I'll click the tick there. So we see that many of our films now receive the word long. I'll just change things back by switching my conditions back to less than 100, then less than 200, and then switch the descriptions around again to short and long, and then press Enter to recreate the correct results. Another advantage of writing switch functions where you use true as the initial expression is that you can reference multiple columns in the same function. If we just switch back to the win label column we created earlier on, I think it's a little unfair to describe some of our films as losers when they couldn't have won anything in the first place. Their Oscar nominations value is 0. So I'd like to modify this expression to check first of all if the Oscar nominations equals 0, then the film should be described as not nominated. And then subsequently, if the Oscar wins value is equal to 0 or 1 or 2, then we'll provide these descriptions. So I have a few changes I need to make to this function. I'm going to start by copying and pasting the movie's Oscar wins column reference. So I'm going to copy that to the clipboard. But before I paste it, I'm going to click at the beginning of line number 3, then hold down the Alt key and click at the beginning of lines 4 and 5 as well. So you can hopefully see there I've got multiple active text cursors blinking away. If I now press Ctrl and V to paste, it will paste in that copied text to all 3 lines at the same time. Then I can type in a space and an equals and another space to create my logical tests. What I'm then going to do is modify movies Oscar wins to say nominations, so movies nominations, and I'm going to check if that is equal to 0. So the first condition we're going to check is whether the nominations equal 0, and if that happens to be true, I'll describe the film as not nominated. So I'll write that in double quotes and then add a comma. Finally, we've got to modify the initial expression we're evaluating, so I'll click at the end of the switch function on the first line after the open round brackets, press Shift and Enter, and then type in the word true, or as much of it as I need to before I can press Tab. Finish that with a comma, and there's an updated version of that win label expression. So if I press Enter now, because this is the first expression that we evaluate, any film which has 0 nominations will be described as not nominated. but if we scroll down far enough, we'll encounter films that were nominated for but didn't win anything. They're losers, proper losers, and then the further down we scroll, the more likely we are to encounter multiple winners and single winners and double winners. At this point, I'd like to use our two new columns to present some data in the report view. So let's head back to the report view first, and I'm going to begin by inserting a matrix from the Visualisations panel. And then into that matrix, I'm going to find my length column, and I'll drag that to the columns bucket in the field well. I'll add my win label column to the rows bucket, and then finally I'll add the ID field to the values bucket to create a count of films in each combination of those categories. Just for something a little bit more interesting to look at, I'm also going to create a copy of that matrix, and then I'll paste it, and I'll shift the copied version across to the right hand side and make that a lot bigger than it currently is. And then I'll convert that into a clustered column chart just by clicking on that particular tool in the Visualisations panel. I'll just need to add just something. I'm going to drag my length field into the legend bucket, and then I'll create 4 different columns for each category of win label. One limitation of the columns we've created is in the way their values are sorted. So you can see that for the win labels in the matrix, they're sorted alphabetically. The chart is currently sorted in descending order of value, but I can change the chart sorting as well to sort based on the values of the win label column. So I can use the extra options button, the ... in the top right hand corner, choose sort by, and then choose win label. And then I'd also have to, if I wanted it sorted in ascending order, subsequently select sort ascending from the same menu. But the problem is that this sort order doesn't really make any sense. I'd like these to be sorted effectively in ascending order of Oscar wins. So I want the not nominated category to be first, then the losers, then the one-hit wonders, then the double winners, and finally the multi-winners. And at the moment I have no way to create that sort order. So what I need to do, if I go back to the data view, it is possible to modify the column that any existing column is sorted by. So for example, if I selected the win label column, and then in the column tools tab of the ribbon, change the sort by column option, I could choose any other column in this table. So let's say, for example, I went for the Oscar wins column. This is going to give me an error. And the reason it gives me an error is because I don't have a single individual value in the Oscar wins column matching each individual value in the win label column. For multi-winners, I've got many different values in Oscar wins. And I need to match the granularity of the sort column and the value column in order to make this work. So what we're going to do is create a new column that's going to be used purely to sort this list. I'm going to close down this error message, and while I've got the win label column selected, I'm going to highlight all of the text in it and then copy that to the clipboard. Then I'm going to create a new column by clicking the new column button and paste in all the code I've just copied. I'm going to add a little label to the end of the name of the column. I'll say win label sort. And then I'm just going to change all of the answers to simple numbers. I want them to go in ascending order. So if the movie's nominations is 0, it's a not nominated film, and I want that to be sorted in ascending order as the first column. So I'm going to use the value 0 for that one. Then on the next line, I'll put in the value 1. On the third line, the value 2. And I think you probably get the idea at this point, all the way up to and including the number 4. I'll enter that expression to create my new column. And then I'm going to go back to the win label column, head back to the sort by column button, and then choose to sort this column by the win label sort column. Okay, now having done that, if we switch back to the report view, we should see that our matrix has automatically updated its sort order, not nominated, losers, one-hit wonders, double winners, multi-winners, as has the chart. One small downside to creating this win label sort column, the only reason I'm using it is to change the sort order of the win label column, but it appears in the field list here, you can see, available to be added into visualizations in the report. If I just switch back to the data view briefly, if I hover over the win label sort column, a little I symbol appears at the right hand side. And if I click on that little I symbol next to win label sort, it hides it from the report view. So switching back to the report view now means that I don't see that win label sort column, so that I can't accidentally add it to any visuals. So there you go, there's a few basic examples of using the switch function to create calculated columns. Hope you found that one useful. Thanks very much for watching, we'll see you next time.